Guess who? October 12th, 2021. And I was wondering what to make a video about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this again. Did you know that Dr. Fauci's got a documentary coming out on the Disney Channel? Friday night, streaming. Well, I don't think it's going to turn out too well for him. One update on my coin collecting. Don't forget to look for these. I found a wheat penny, 1941. It's in pretty good shape. So I put it in one of my, I guess lost it. Oh, well. Live with facial expressions. I am not reading it, although I will be reading it. That's not it. You probably can't see it through the plastic. Why did I put them in plastics? Because I bought the plastic at a coin auction. And they were the same as free. Can you see that? Probably not. It's a wheat penny. 1941. In really good shape. Do you know why the pennies, especially the old pennies, are all in pretty good shape? Because they didn't put them into vending machines. Remember those, go to the restaurant? That pretty little girl in your brand new old car? And you'd put a song on and punch the buttons. Those are nickels and dimes. And I don't know, my mom, when she was a hostess, sometimes when I'd get off of school, she'd have to work late, so I'd be there. She used to take fingernail polish and put it on a quarter and tell me to put it in there, because those were owned by the restaurant. Everything else was owned by the restaurant, but the red ones were, atmosphere for the customers, make them feel good. So, this is chapter 32, and I'm not going to read it all. And I know a couple of you have this book out there. Remember those old spy movies? You'd have one group of intelligence officers, another group over here, and they'd have like a code. Third sentence, fifth letter, down 5 sentences, back over to the right, and it would spell a message. But you had to have the right book. So this is talking about influenza. The overwhelming majority of victims, especially in the Western world, recovered quickly and fully. This was, after all, only influenza. But the virus sometimes caused one final complication, one final sequence. The influenza virus affected the brain and nervous system. All high fevers cause delirium. But this was something else. An Army physician at Walter Reed Hospital investigating serious mental disturbances and even psychosis that seemed to follow an attack of influenza specifically noted delirium occurring at the height of the disease and clearing with the ceasing of fever is not considered in this report. The connection between influenza and various mental instabilities seemed clear. The evidence was almost entirely accidental, not accidental, acetonal. I don't know. I have to look that one up on pronunciation. The worst and the weakest kind of evidence, but it convinced a vast majority of contemporary observers that influenza could alter the mental processes. What convinced them were observations such as these. From Britain, profound mental inertia with intense physical prostration. Delirium has been very common. It has varied from mere confusion of ideas through all grades of intensity up to maniacal excitement, as in a maniac. From Italy, influential psychosis of the acute period, as a rule, subside in 2 or 3 weeks. The psychosis, however, may pass into a state of mental collapse with stupor, which may persist and become actual dementia. In other cases, depression, restlessness, to which can be attributed the large number of suicides during the pandemic of this influenza outbreak. From France, frequent and serious mental disturbances during convalescence form and as a result of influenza. The mental disturbances sometimes took on the form of acute delirium with agitation, violence, fear, erotic excitation, and it sometimes was of a depressive nature, fear of persecution. From different U.S. Army cantonments, the mental condition was either apathetic or there was an active delirium. Cerebration was slow. The patient's statements and assurances were unreliable. A morbid person stating he felt very well. In other cases, apprehensiveness was most striking. The mental depression of the patient is often out of all proportion to the other symptoms. Nervous symptoms appeared early, restless, and delirium being marked. Melancholia, hysteria, and insanity with suicidal intent. Toxic environment of the nervous system was evident in all the more severe cases. Many patients lay in muttering delirium which persisted as the temperatures were back to normal. Symptoms referable to the central nervous system were seen at times as twitching of the muscles, of the fingers, of the forearms, and the face, an active, even maniacal, occasional delirium, or more usually the low mumbling type. Infectious psychosis was seen in 18 cases, from simple transient hallucinations to maniacal frenzy with needed mechanical restraint. Contemporary observers also linked influenza to an increase in Parkinson's disease a decade later. Some have theorized that the patient in Oliver Sacks' The Awakening, a book, were victims of the 1918 influenza pandemic. Many believe that the virus could cause schizophrenia. In 1926, Carl Menninger studied links between influenza and schizophrenia. His studies was considered significant enough that the American Journal of Psychiatry identified it as a classic article and reprinted it in 1994. Menninger spoke of the almost unequal neurotoxicity of influenza and noted that 2/3 of those diagnosed with schizophrenia after an attack of the flu had completely recovered 5 years later. Recovery from schizophrenia is extremely rare, suggesting that some repairable process had caused the initial symptoms. In 1927, the American Medical Association Review of hundreds of medical journal articles from around the world concluded there seems to be general agreement that influenza may act on the brain, from the delirium accompanying many acute attacks to the psychosis that develops as post-influential manifestations. There is no doubt that the neuropsychiatric effects of influenza are profound and varied. The effect of the influenza virus on the nervous system is hardly second to its effect on the respiratory tract. In 1934, a similar comprehensive review by British scientists agreed there would appear to be no doubt that influenza exerts a profound influence on the nervous system. And that's all I'm going to read on that for right now. So, what does this have to do with anything? I haven't had the influenza in a long, long time. I did have a head cold. I remember when I used to take the flu shot back in the early 90s. I always got sick for about 10 days. I mean, so sick that I just laid on the couch. But I'd be angry afterwards. I had a little bit of anger problem back then. And so I have a friend, his 90-year-old mom passed away from complications of COVID. But he definitely had COVID, and he was sicker than a dog. And I've noticed a lot of stress, but he's been somewhat more angry when he does his videos. You also have to take into effect that World War I was ending, and you know what kind of hellhole that was. You had entire families cooped up together, and they were dying. You could get married on a Wednesday and be a widower on a Saturday. So I hope you enjoy the Dr. Fauci documentary. I hear he cries, and it's so tear-jerking. Actually, from what I saw of the trailer, he's somewhere here at this stage of the book. This thing ain't over. I may go a little long here, I may do two parts, I don't know. We'll see how the computer does. Watched two movies, 1984, which came out in 1985, but it was made in 1984, and of course they wouldn't air it in the Bible Belt. If you've read the book, you know why. If not, just go to the 25 famous quotes. It's on Wikipedia. The other one was Exodus, the one that came out in 2018. You know, I don't watch a movie anymore unless it's free. Oh, I'm so tight, even my chair squeaks. But it was pretty interesting. And of course, I grew up on Charlton Heston, Ten Commandments. So what did you have? Something similar to what we have right now. Two classes of people. Bankers, oligarchs, magicians, medicinal, whatever they were called. And then you had the Hebrew people, slaves, been there 400 years. They came down from Canaan because Joseph loved his brothers. And there was a famine in the land. And they prospered and they multiplied. Pretty interesting. Came out in Came out in 2018. Shows Moses putting on a mask. Right after that, he's talking to his brother Pharaoh and a couple other would-be king clowns, talking about they are overpopulating. We have too many of them. We can't feed them. We don't have enough work for them. Well, let's just keep building stuff. And they worked them to death. They starved them to death. And they probably did this if they could have. And so I don't agree with everything, but in any Hollywood movie you're not. It seems that God appears to him as a young child and talks to him. But there is a scripture, and a young child shall lead them. But anyway, bottom line is this. The plagues did come. And there is a book written by the Egyptians. It's not the King James, and it's not the Hebrew Bible. It's the Qumran Bible. And in it, it describes all of these events from the point of the view of the Egyptians. And so over the last 20 years, I've had people laugh at me. What will you do when Nibiru comes for you? They call it Planet X now. And the faint of heart will not survive. And what does it say in the Bible? In the last days, men's heart will fail them for what they see coming upon the earth. If you're watching the volcanoes, La Palma has got quite a following. I check in on it every evening. A great mountain was cast into the sea. So everybody's expecting an asteroid. I think that's wormwood. I don't know if they're the same thing. Probably not, since we now are a global community and the gospel has been spread to all four corners of the world. So this is going to be a global event. It's already started. Can you believe it? Last week, they're complaining about gas prices for cars, liquid gas for heating your home in Britain, and it's going to snow there this weekend. Matter of fact, it's going to get down to 42 here in Kansas City, which is all right. I would rather be cold than hot. And because my basement is halfway underground, I have never seen my house, even when it was like really cold outside and the furnace was broke. It never really got much below 20. So I guess turn the water off and drain the pipes. Good to be from the Ozarks. Oh, and how did I stay warm? I had gas. I had a hot water tank. And I would take a hot shower when I got cold. Kind of felt like a Scandinavian. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't really want to talk about the economy, but if I was to guess, it's getting ready to stagger. If I was going to talk about Taiwan and China, I'd say don't worry about it. It's Australia's problem. And Australia's not going to do anything unless U.S. jumps in. U.S. ain't going to jump in. Because the U.S. just might have a series of plagues they're getting ready to deal with because we got some, bless their heart. You know, any person who wants power and gets it is not likely to give it up. So with those words of wisdom, my folks, shalom. Talk to you later.